Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this morning. So this is Automating Enterprise Workflows with FME Server. So a few of you might have seen that we sort of put out a call for suggestions on things that people wanted to see automated. So these could be things in your business that perhaps you're having trouble with, or you're just curious about how FME can start to automate those processes for you, sort of make those jobs less manual and make your lives easier. So we did have a few suggestions through, and that's what the three of us are going to be working through this morning and giving you some demonstrations. So my name's Jen, and I'm in the middle here, and I'm joined by Holly Coxon and Laura Wu.
Good morning.
So we're all on the Server Experts team at SAFE. We'll also be Q&Aing the webinar as well when we're not demoing. So if you do have any questions as we're going through, just let us know in the questions panel on the webinar. In the agenda today, we've had 6 suggestions come through, so we're going to be covering those today. So the first one, we'll have a look at some ways to sort of watch things. So we're having a look at Directory Watch and FTP Watch. Someone was interested in scheduling. And we've also got some CAD validation, a sort of a big workflow that required sort of chaining a lot of different things together. And we did have a suggestion come through that was CityWorks to Jira, but we're actually going to demo Salesforce to Jira and explain why when we get to that one. So thank you to everyone who did submit a workflow to us. And just to sort of give you a bit of a warning before we get into the demos, we're going to be using FME Server 2019 during this webinar, which is still under development. So some of the things you're going to see today, we're actually showing off automations, which any sort of longer term FME users might be familiar with. Automations has been sort of coming for a while now, but in 2019 it's actually getting released properly. So we're going to be giving you a preview of that this morning and building these workflows in automations. But because FME Server is still in development, there are things that are going to change with automations. So some of the actual functionality and features are going to change slightly before release. And as well, automations is getting completely, sort of all the web UI around automations is getting changed. So the way it looks today is not how it's going to look when it gets released. So you can still get excited because like the core functionality is going to stay the same, but then you'll get even more excited when it is released because it's going to be better. So there is also a blog article coming out tomorrow, I believe, that Mark Island has put together just to cover some more information around what automations sort of includes. So stay tuned for that as well, because we're not going to have a chance to show you everything that's in automations today.
Okay, so I'm Holly and I'm going to be taking over from Jen now to walk you through the first couple of demonstrations. So the first request that we had in was from somebody that was looking for a way to monitor an input folder and then just run a task in FME Server when a new file was added to that resource. So now I think I'm just going to jump straight into the demonstration. So we're going to move over to the FME Server homepage now. And originally I was going to show you this demonstration with an external resources folder, but unfortunately we're having a bit of trouble connecting to the virtual machine this morning. So I'm just going to show you adding a resource within the FME resources shared folder. But the process works in exactly the same way. All that is required to use an external resource is you just need the UNC path and to make sure that your FME Server services has permissions to access that folder. So now we're just going to jump into the automations page. So as you can see, we've just got the new drop down on the menu on the left-hand side. And we have 2 options here. We have the option to build a new automation. And then there's also a manage section where you can review your current automation. So as you can see here, on this FME server, we already have a few automations set up, and you can see whether they're enabled or disabled, and you can also see their status. So if there's any jobs that have failed to run or warnings that have been reported, it's really clear on that page straight away. So now we're just going to jump in and build this first automation. So as Jen said, it's possible that this page will change, but the way the process works and the way you set up will be the same. So at the bottom here, we have these three icons. We have sources, actions, and destinations. So the source is sort of the equivalent from in the notifications, the publication. So since we're going to be using a directory watch, we'll first add a source onto the page. And it's a nice and easy, just drag and drop into the window. And then you have the setup here. So first we need to select the source type or the protocol. So in this case, we'll select directory watch. And for the directory to watch, since I'm going to be doing it in FME Server, we can just click on these three dots here, and I'll just navigate to the folder that I'm going to be using today. But this is where you'd add the UNC path if you were looking to watch a folder outside of FME Server. And then after this, we have a couple of additional options. So you might be interested in also watching out for subdirectories and whether you want to receive notifications on new folders as well as files. But for both of these, we're just going to leave them set for no for this demonstration. And then lastly, you can choose a filter as to whether you want to watch whether files are being created, modified and deleted, or just pick one or more of those. So again, for this demonstration, we're only really interested in files that are going to be created. And then we're going to watch out for these files. And if a file that we're interested in comes in, we'll set it to run a workspace. And so again, we're just going to reduce the poll interval to 1 minute so that you guys aren't sitting here waiting and watching for a long time this morning. So once we've got the directory watch set up, before we do an action, before we run the workspace, sorry, we're actually going to add a filter in. And this is a new action that we've added into the automations. I think this was quite highly requested as something that we add to the directory watch capabilities so that you can watch for a folder and add multiple different file types to that, but only run an action based on a single file type. So next we'll add an action to the canvas and we'll join these two together, and then we'll change this action to a filter. So one of the great things that FME Server offers, that the automations page now offers, is that this JSON that was coming out of the directory watch, so previously that was sent to a topic as a string of JSON, and then you'd have to pass that JSON through and flatten it and take it apart in order to use the different elements of the JSON in your workspace. So in automations, that's been done for you. So as you can see, we have the whole message string, or we have different components set up. So for this demonstration, since we're going to look for a certain file type, we'll just use the file path as the message key. And then what I'm going to do is simply upload a shape file, and obviously that comes with a number of different files, but when you're running the workspace, the only one you actually need is the file extension .shape. And if any others are passed through in that shape reader, then the workspace will fail anyway. So we don't want the workspace to be triggered 4 times, firstly, and for 3 of those to fail. So in this contain string option, we're simply going to add .shp, and that will make sure that the only file path that's brought through is the .shape file. And so then the last thing we want to do is add a workspace to this page, and we'll join it onto the past filter port, and then we'll have the action as run workspace. And so I simply have a workspace here that is just going to take the shape file and write it out to another destination, just so that we can see that it's passing it all through. So I'll just add this repository in. Oh. It found me, even though I only picked up the last 2 letters of my name, so that was good. Oh, sorry, it's not in that. It's not in that repository. Let's have a look in here. There we go, automations directory watch. And so again, now we've got the source Esri shapefile, we can just add that event file path. rather than bringing through the whole set of JSON. And for the destination shape folder, I've set that up to go in the, so we're going to load the data into this input folder, and then we're going to have it written out into the output folder here. So we'll just select OK. And now at the moment, the workflow isn't saved. So I'm just going to make sure that that workflow is saved before we lose it all. And we can just write directory watch. And for the tag, I'll just write demo. And this is just an easy way to categorize. And you might be able to filter through the tags.
For the directory watch?
Yeah. Yeah. So you can filter these tags. Okay, and so at the moment we've got this automation set up, but just like a schedule or anything else in FME Server, at the moment it's not going to start watching the directory. First we have to activate or enable this automation. So at the moment we've just got this slide over icon in the right-hand side of the screen. So once this has been enabled, the directory watch will start looking and polling that folder every minute. So now we can just select enabled, and then that's all set up and ready to go. So this is the current automation. So as you can see, it's really simple. We've just got the directory watch filter to the workspace. So if this was being set up in notifications, you'd also have a topic in here, and you wouldn't be able to see it visually like this. You'd have to go across 3 screens and to really work out what was going into what. So this is a really nice, easy way to see the automation all set up. So now we're just going to move over to the resources folder, and we're going to upload those 4 shapefiles into that input. So I'll just select upload files folder. I might need to zip these up. Should I zip the shapefiles up? No, awesome. Okay. Right, and then I need to find these. So for this demonstration, I'm just going to use some of the data that's available in our training courses. So I'll just select these 4 shapefiles, select open, and then once these have been uploaded, as you can see in the top here, that's confirmed the upload, and then we can move back over to the automation. And I can show you how you can view the jobs triggered straight from the automations page. So we can go back into the directory watch and have a look at the menu here. And we've got 2 options here. We've got the view triggered jobs and the view log file. So the log file will just tell you how often the directory is being watched. And when it sees the files come in, it will also list these down here as well. And then the other thing that we've got here is the view triggered jobs. So once the directory watch has been polled and these files have been picked up, we should be able to see that a job has successfully run in here as well. So the polling interval is every 1 minute. So even though we've just uploaded, we might have to wait a minute just to see that those have been picked up and the job has been run. Or 2 minutes. We wait and we watch.
Always feels longer when you're live on a webinar.
Yeah, definitely. 1 minute feels like 1 hour.
I guess while we're waiting for that one, you could set up another one. Your next one?
Sure, absolutely. I can move on to the FTP Watch. Definitely. So I'm trying to work out, I think I have that set up on this machine as well. Okay, so we'll just go back to the presentation and I'll go through that second request then today. So this user, let me just go back into presentation mode. So this user downloads gas and oil data to their geodatabase from both Colorado and New Mexico from their FTP sites. And for both of these data sets, they get data for the entire state or the entire district that they operate in. And so that's a lot of unwanted data. So they had two requests. Firstly, was there a way to only select those records that were in their area of interest to write out into their SDE? And the second thing was to watch that FTP site and have that process automated. So there's no need to manually go in just to check if there's even been data uploaded every day. So for this example, I have set up a workspace. And so I have pulled data from the New Mexico FTP site for this example. And then what we're going to do, rather than using a reader, we're going to use a feature reader. And this allows you to add a spatial filter based on a polygon or an area of interest. So what I've got set up in here is, in the feature reader, I've set the data set as a user parameter. And this means that it will be published and be shown on the FME server interface. And that means that we can change it and direct it to the value coming from the FTP watcher. And then the second parameter that we have set up in here is the spatial filter. And that is the initiator containing the result. And then what we'll do is we'll have that writing out to a geodatabase. So in this example, we're just going to watch Safe's FTP site so that I can upload the data, and again, we can see it in action for you this morning. But so this user should be able to change the area of interest to an actual polygon that applies to their area, and again, change the FTP watch information to the FTP sites of interest. And since they have two different FTP folders that they're watching, you can just replicate this process in the automation, so you can have two FTP watches, two different FTP sites going into your workspaces. So again, we'll just move back over into FME Server now to explain this to you. So before I create the automation, we'll just go into the workspace viewer and have a better look at that workspace that I just discussed, because it was very small on the screen there. So we'll just go into this page and select FTP Watch. So as you can see, it's very simple. We've just got a creator. So for this example, I'm just creating a box that covered part of the data coming in from New Mexico. And then this is the really important part. So the data set is going to be the FTP path coming in from the source automation. And then the spatial filter is this initiator contains result. So this is the initiator input. So anything that is contained within that initiator will then be passed through, and then we move through to write into a geodatabase. So now we'll move over to the automation. And again, we'll select build since we're creating a new automation. And this time we're still going to add a source, but we're going to add the FTP watcher. So we'll select FTP Watch, and then this one requires a little bit more setup than the directory watch one did. Sorry, these are just automatically filled from my FME server password, but these are slightly different, so we'll get rid of those. Oh, maybe. I'll just refill them in when we get around to it. Okay, so the host is just ftp.safe.com. And then we're happy for the port to stay at 21. And since you don't require a login to go into this site, we'll just put anonymous here because this username isn't optional, sorry. So anonymous will work fine for that. We'll leave these settings as they are. And then for the path to watch, we're looking to watch the incoming folder. And we are not interested in watching subdirectories, and we'll change the polling interval to 1 minute. And again, we're only looking at files that we are creating. So we'll just get rid of these two other options. So after the FTP Watch, we then want to add an action because we want to run that workspace. So we'll move over and select that workspace. And again, so this source path is a little bit more complicated because the file path is made up of two different components, the host name and also the path to watch name. So rather than just selecting a single event detail, we're actually going to open up the text editor, and then we'll be able to compile multiple different components of the JSON together. So to build this path, firstly, we'll just add the FTP, and then we're interested in adding the host name followed by the file path, which will be the /incoming/ the file name. Okay, so once we've got that set up, we can move over to add the destination, and this is already uploaded onto the server as well. So I'll just go over and locate that. So it's simply named FTP Watch. So I'll select that folder and then select OK. And lastly, we've got an optional parameter here, max features to read. And this is just for the example because this dataset contains a lot of features. So we'll just reduce these so the workspace doesn't take as long to run. So we'll just add 1,000 features in here just for the example. And then the last thing that I have included in this demonstration is a destination. Oh, sorry, not a destination, an action, which is a log. So the last thing that we want to do is just have a record of what's coming in, when it's coming in, and that it's been successfully written out. So I'll just add the past port of the workspace into the log and also the failed port so that we can record whether this has failed or passed. And again, this time we're going to use the text editor, and we want to add a bit of information into the job, about the job into here. So for example, we can have job ID, the job status, was finished, at the time finished, and then we can include the file path as well. So with this file path, and select OK. And then just for this example, I have got a log file saved in the temporary location. So I'll just add in that that's what I would like to write to as well. And then of course, the final step before enabling is to make sure that this workflow is saved. So we'll just move over and do FTP Watch here. And again, we'll tag it as a demo. So once that workspace has been saved, we would again, just like in the directory watch example, need to enable this automation. And then we can move over and drop the files into the FTP folder. So where is my FTP folder? I'm not sure I'm connected to it. Do I connect? Okay, we'll jump into FileZilla just to upload this data onto the FTP site. If it's open, that might be it in the corner there. Oh, not now, thank you. Okay, I think that is my FileZilla over in the corner there. So let's see if I can just pull that out. There we go. Okay, so I should have previously connected to this, so we'll just go on reconnect. And then as we labeled it incoming, let's make sure that we drop that file into incoming. So I'll just pull up my data. So this is a zip file, and this is how it was downloaded from the New Mexico FTP site. So this would be exactly what was uploaded and what they'd be looking out for. So I can just drop this into the incoming folder. And so that's uploading now. And hopefully we'll move over and see that the directory watch, the previous demo, has now been finished. And hopefully once that's been finished, this one will also have completed as well. So just while we're waiting, we'll move back over to the directory watch demonstration. So it's not looking happy. It's got a failed status there. So let's go over and have a look at the log file and see what's happening. So it looks like it's picked up that the action has been created, but then an error has occurred. So let's have a look at that. Well, this was working earlier, guys.
So I think what happens here is you've got 3 failed jobs because that filter is checking to see if they have the dot shape extension. So those other ones don't get passed through, they fail. So you think things are going wrong, but actually you're still good.
Yeah.
Oh, you are absolutely right, Jen. I should have gone on to the viewed jobs first. So the filter runs a workspace that's on the server called filter message. So this is our successful one. So this is the shape that's passed through. And the actual workspace that we were running has also been successful. So we can go over to the resources and check that those files have been written into the output as well. And there we go. There are your forward sortation areas, which was the data that we uploaded from the training data set. Great. Okay, so let's move over to the FTP Watch and have a look and see if that one has had any success. Awesome, so we've got 2 very happy jobs here. So that was picked up and the workspace was run, and then we also logged the message. So the log message, again, like the filter, runs the workspace. So let's go and have a look and see if that log recorded the information we specified as well. Great. So as you can see here, this is what I wrote. So job status, is that what I wrote? Oh, message location is, here we go. Yeah, so I think that's both of the watch demonstrations done. So I'll move back into the presentation and I will let Jen take over from here. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so the next one we're going to have a look at is someone was interested in scheduling something to run nightly. So they want to use sort of their Esri SDE to sort of where their clients will sort of work from in that database. But then every sort of night they want that mirrored onto a Postgres instance, which they've got through Boundless. So this one was quite a simple one, luckily. So this was the workspace that was built to do this. So you can see really easily, you've just got an SDE reader on the left-hand side. And then because you're sort of just doing a straight copy over into Postgres, you just need to add a Postgres writer. And then what you can do when you're adding in that writer is sort of it gives you the options for the feature types. So you can choose the table definition to copy from the reader. So it basically copies all of those attributes over from SDE and puts them straight on the Postgres writer. So you're going to have that replication straight away. And then because the Postgres puts them all in lowercase, the attributes don't quite line up straight away, but you can right-click on the lines between the readers and writers, right-click and press Auto Connect Attributes, and it just magically matches them up all together. And then that's your workspace built. It might be the quickest workspace I've built in a long time, actually. And there's no transformers as well, so that's a win. And then sort of building this in the automations, I'll go over to FME Server now so I can show you how to build this one. So already signed in. And we can go to the automations option on the left-hand side, and I'm going to build one. So I can close that down. And then for this one, because they wanted it scheduled to run every night, we're going to add a source into this automation, but this time it's going to be a schedule as the source. So you can scroll down in here, find schedule, and then just as if you would set up schedules sort of the other way, just using the schedules UI, you get those same options appear here. So you can choose how often you want this schedule to run. So I'm going to set this to run every 1 day, get that to start tonight. So you could have it start like 11:45 p.m. And just have that not expire, and then set that up. Is okay. And then because this schedule is just running that one workspace, which I've already published up to FME Server, I can choose that action and drag that on. And in this, I'm going to set it to run a workspace. I'm going to go to my webinar repository, and actually it's in the database updates repository, and it's got that geodatabase SDE to PostGIS. There's no parameters really here apart from my database connection file, so that's an easy one. Press OK, and then connect those up. So what I can do just to prove that this is working as well is actually get this to start immediately, and then it will actually run at this time every day. But once I've checked that it's running properly, I can come in back and edit this automation and set it to run at nighttime. So I'm going to save this automation as nightly SDE to PostJS. I'll give that a demo tag as well. Press OK. So now that's saved, we can enable this automation. And if we go to the running jobs, we should see that this workspace has started because I told this schedule to start running immediately. So you can see this workspace is running. There's quite a few features going through here, so it won't be instant to run. But what I actually did do as well is cheated a little bit for the demo, is actually put in a date time stamper between the SDE reader and the PostGIS writer, just to prove to you guys that this is working and this isn't one I made earlier and then sort of put away. As this will add that date timestamp every time it's running. So I have been testing this morning, and now because we're using Holly's machine, I was going to find PG admin. Oh, yours is in the web browser.
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. Mine's an application. So.
Well, I tried to get the application, but this is the only way I could do it.
Well, this is easier, so this is good. So we can go into our schemas. This is just being written into a demo database on our PostGIS instance. And it's called SDE user because it's coming from SDE, and I just copied over the schema from the SDE database into PostGIS. And then in the tables, I've got the demo building and demo roads, which are the two feature types I've got here that I'm just replicating across. And then if I view the first 100 rows, hopefully the timestamp is going to be this morning at some point after this webinar has started, just to prove that this is working. So, or maybe not, maybe it hasn't finished running yet. So the last time I tested this was at 7:45, but that's adding in there. And then every day now when this workspace runs, that should update and add that timestamp into there. And if I go back to the automation, what I could do as well, and here you don't have to stop with that workspace running, just in case that hasn't run and maybe you need to go and investigate manually in the morning, you could always add an email at destination here as well, just to let somebody know what the status of that message is. But I'm actually going to add an email destination in a demo slightly later on, so I won't do that for this one. It sort of gives you more options and flexibility with these simple automations, so you can sort of get notified depending on the status of what's going on. So it makes it a lot more flexible and easy and quick to set up as well. So that was that one. I think this is you, Laura.
Yes, it is. All right, so for our next example, so this one came from another request. In this case, they wanted to build a web front end for a workspace that would take DWG files, so digital plan and as-built standards, and assess them and make sure they're up to standards and they've got all the right information inside and everything like that. and then pass and fail the drawing after validating it against a set of predefined rules. So it could be really anything that involves just matching it up against their standards to make sure it's good. And then once it passes the validation, they wanted to be able to integrate the data into their database. Or if it failed, they wanted to be able to let the user know why it failed and what to do to fix their data and how to resubmit that. So let's get into this. So the first piece we'll look at for this example is just the back end. So the most important and probably the hardest to put together would be the workspace itself. And that's just setting up the validation and data processing tasks and rules. So this is where most of the brains happens for this particular workflow. So here you've got, you set up a reader connecting to the DWG file, pass it through all your different testers and everything like that. So things pass. We've got a feature writer in here, which is inserting the data into the database. And if it fails, we're building up a report on the other side to collect information about what went wrong. Then once the workspace is done, I had an automation set up to kind of automate just sending out an email when the workspace finishes to let that user know what happened when the workspace ran. So I can show that briefly. Let's see, we have, there it is, blue sky. So I can just open it up. So I've got my workspace that's in here. It's a busy server. There we are. And my validation workflow. So that's just the workspace that I published up to the server. So it's pretty basic. It's just reading in the file, creating my report, and I'm using an FME server notifier on the other end to send out a notification to the server when the workspace is finished running. So this notifier is notifying a topic. And then in my automation here, I go to manage. I've just created a very basic automation that is receiving information from that topic. So it's receiving the report that my workspace built and additional information about who sent in the file originally, and then just sending an email back to that person to let them know how their validation workflow went. So that piece is pretty straightforward. And one thing I can do with this is simply run the workspace directly within FME Server here. So if you want to keep it very basic, you can just use Server's default interface for this kind of workflow. In here, I've created a set of published parameters to be able to set kind of project name, project number, and just get some inputs from the user, as well as the DWG file they want to validate. So that's one option. So you could do that. It's nice and simple, and this will work really well. For this particular workflow, this user wanted to have their own kind of custom front end for it. So I can show that. So the next piece is the front end. So instead of using Server's default interface, I decided to use the FME Server REST API to build a custom interface on that. So I used the REST API and some JavaScript code to do that. And I was able to build a simple form. So I've done a little bit of formatting with it since. And basically all this is doing is using the REST API to query the workspace, pull out the published parameter options, and then just build just a nice front end. So you can customize this as much as you want to make it fit whatever your kinds of needs are. And then here I can upload my data for validation. And that in documents. There we go. Automations. Perfect. There we are. So I've got some data sets here to try out. So I'll go with some bad data to start. And open that up, add in my information, project number, editor name, and my email, and submit that for validation. So behind the scenes, that'll submit a job to FME Server. So here I've got my job ID back. It's just letting me know I'll get an email back with my results shortly. And I head over to my email here. And there we go. So I got an email directly back from that server. So it was the automation that triggered this, and the workspace that actually built the content for this. So this is giving me a summary of what was wrong with my data, giving me some information and a map of where that location was. I can also download a copy of the failed features. So I could then go into my data, fix it all up, and then maybe I can come here and reset this, upload my good data now that it's all cleaned, Again, same project name. And submit that. And then this time when the data passes my validation, I'll again get another email just to let me know exactly what happened. And there we go, my validation is passed, it's been uploaded to the database. And then it just gives me a nice little summary of what happened there. It's a nice, simple way to automate these workflows. Okay. Let's head on to the next example here. Is this Jen again?
Yeah. So this one was quite a long one, but it also makes it more interesting. So this customer wrote in, and they've got a sort of a multi-step process that they've got quite a few workspaces processing millions of features. So their inputs here, they've got a lot of Esri file geodatabases with state-based feature class layers, one state per file geodatabase. And then they're writing this to a SQL Server database, which has all of those sort of multiple nationwide layers in, and they're using native geometries in that. And then what they're getting out at the end is sort of data delivery products, which might be Esri shapefiles and file geodatabase. And these have been cut out and separated into regions. And then depending on which format it is, we'll have a different schema. So sort of tackle this in three different parts. So the first part is that data ingestion. So a lot of the sort of statewide file geodatabases will have four main layers in, differing granularity, and then these are loaded into SQL Server using a Python process. And I think there's a group of states that must be working together here. So only one of them has an FME process to load that data into SQL Server. Then they're also loading in additional reference layers that are loaded by FME. And these are being run on a Windows server with FME Desktop installed. And these are getting run manually as needed with our file geodatabase readers and SQL Server writers. So to kind of simplify this process a little bit, I don't have access to all of their data or their additional reference layers, etc. I built a simple automation which we can go and have a look at in FME Server that can start to do that data ingestion for them, so it doesn't need to be run manually. So Holly showed the directory watch earlier. We can use that as a trigger for an automation. Use the same filter message just to make sure. In the example here, I'm going to load in shape files rather than file geodatabases because that was the data I had to hand. And then get this to run a workspace that will load that data into a database. So if we can go back to this machine here, I actually have a workspace already on the server that will load that data into a database. So I'm actually, because I was already connected to and had access to a Post.js instance that's sort of public, I'm using that one in the workspace. So we can have a look. Where's the binoculars? So wherever you're sort of looking at a workspace, see those binoculars, you can click that and it will view the workspace. So what I'm actually doing in this one is it's waiting for the incoming data, which in this case is shapefiles. Because I'm working with some of the sort of Ordnance Survey open data to get a range of different layers in different areas, I didn't want to start loading in the whole of the UK end of this demo. So it's only sort of cutting out some counties and loading those in, which is why there's clippers in this workspace. But then it's reading in that data, depending on what the feature type is. I've got some merge filters in here. It's going to read in some buildings and write these out into Post.js. So we can go back to automations now and build this one. So I can get rid of that page. So just as before, we're going to add in a source, or I think it's just getting renamed to be a trigger. So if these words are being used interchangeably today, it will be a trigger when FME Server 19 is released. And I'm going to add that directory watch in here. I've got a folder set up already on the server in the resources, which will be the incoming VMD, which is the vector map district datasets. So I'm going to have it watch this folder. Yeah. I don't want to receive notifications for folders. I only really want to know when new data has been uploaded into here. And again, I'll set that poll interval for 1 minute because we're doing a demo and we don't really want to sit here for 5 minutes in an awkward silence and wait.
30 seconds is awkward enough.
Yeah, we don't need 5 minutes. And then I'm going to add that filter tool. As I mentioned, I'm uploading shapefiles. So again, like earlier, I only want the next workspace to run and have an input of a .shape. I don't want the .prj or the .shx to trigger that workspace. So for the action, I'm going to set that to filter. And I'm going to choose the event details of the file path. Just make sure that contains a .shp. Apply that one. Then I'll add my next workspace onto the canvas. Connect those up. And then my workspace that I'm going to run is in that webinars repository. There we go. And this one is the Esri shape to Post.js workspace. So you can see here those input parameters for this workspace have appeared at the bottom. So for the source Esri shapefiles, I don't want it to take that file path because that's from my Mac. That's not going to be useful here. So I can click in this big box to browse, which actually isn't what I want to do. The source Esri shapefiles are coming from that directory watch. So again, I'm going to use that file path in here to set that up. This one is that fixed shapefile that's not going to come through the automation. This is actually living in my resources. So I can go and find that in here. So make sure I've got that SHP selected, okay. And now this workspace is set up to run. So I can apply this one, I need to save it. So let's not give it that demo tag again. What is it? Okay. And then we can enable this one. So that's good to go. I'll go back to my resources folder and upload some more data into this incoming vector map district folder. Oops. So hopefully under documents, OS data, I'm going to upload this SO folder. Yep. And then you can see it's starting to upload in the top corner. You can see the progress of that. And then once that minute has passed since it's last checked and it's seen those files, it should start running that workspace. So any of those shape files will start getting uploaded to PostGIS. So while we're waiting for that one, we can go back and have a look at what they're doing for the rest of their workflow. So part 2 is once all that data has been loaded into a database with any of those updates, there's a few FME processes that will create the data delivery products. So in this case, the user is running FME Server in Docker on Linux. So they're using the SQL Server, JDBC, spatial readers, generic shape writers, and the file geodatabase API writers are used. Because on Linux, you aren't able to install sort of Esri ArcGIS Enterprise next to FME Server, you can't actually use those formats on there. So if they were doing this on a Windows machine, they would be good, but because they're doing it on Linux in Docker, they're using the sort of generic shape writers and the file geodatabase API writer instead. And then for querying their database, they've set up multiple views on their SQL Server, which just makes it quicker to read that data in instead of bringing everything in and then sort of clipping out the required regions. They're using those views to quickly bring in the data that they need for the right regions. And then what they're doing is using Python to manually update FME Server through the API. And then they've got some scripts that will load all of the resources and workspaces, as well as kick off all the jobs. So for this part here, what I did, sort of simplifying it down a little bit, was extended this automation and added another workspace action at the end of it. So the next workspace is just reading in from Post.js, and depending on which areas are updated, it knows which counties or regions are sort of being affected by those updates, and then is using those to extract them into a file geodatabase. So we can go back to FME Server and check that one, see whether that automation was running. So we can go and have a look. Triggered jobs, that hasn't fired off yet. And then what I would do to add the next workspace to this automation I'm going to disable this one because you can't edit while an automation is enabled. But then all I would need to do is allow the editing again, drag the next workspace on as my next action, and then go back and choose the next workspace here. So this one is the PostGIS clip to file geodatabase. And again, I need to make sure that I'm choosing the right data here. So that county shapefile is correct because it's using the FME shared resource data parameter. But which data set was updated? This is going to come from the automation. So I want to add that file thing in here, but no, it's not letting me.
Are they connected up?
No. There we go. Oh, that's clever. Okay. So we're going to take that file event again, take the file path, and we're going to write out that file geodatabase into the resources. So I've got an output folder for the geodatabases, press OK, and apply. And then once we're done editing this, we would re-enable this automation, and then it would carry on running next time data has been uploaded into that directory watch. So because I was messing around during this demo for time, it looks like it has had some jobs go through now, which is good. I don't know whether pausing it for a minute will have interrupted what it was doing. And we can see it's had a few successful filter messages go through, which should add some jobs to my queue, hopefully, that will do that processing. So because that uploaded a lot of data inside those files, there's a lot of jobs that are waiting to be queued, but you can see when it successfully found a shapefile, it's added that PostGIS clip to file geodatabase to the queue. And then again, there's a lot more filtering going on. So this one could take a little while to go through. So there is one that I made earlier, cleverly, this PostGIS to VMD updates automation. So this gives you a sneak preview of what was to come in part 3. We can have a look at the trigger jobs here and see that this did all of those as well. And this did start clipping out those geodatabases and then putting those in the resources folder. So I can go and have a look inside here in the output county one. So these are some of the ones that were running this morning and actually still running from earlier on when I started them, because this process takes a little bit longer. So you can see it's creating these geodatabases in my resources folder on FME Server, and those were created this morning. So now to move on to what part 3 would be here. Because they were doing this manually and sort of off the FME Server machine, what I was thinking here was to set up in the next automation, you want a way of being notified when that bit's done so they can go and run their Python scripts. So what I just added in the automation, if we go back to the one I made earlier, just added in another source in here, which is the directory watch. So it's actually watching that output folder now for new geodatabases that are coming through. And then it can send an email once those have been written, and you can put in your connection details in here. You can see in the email template at the bottom, I just used some of those parameters that come through just to say that for the file path, if the geodatabase which has been written has been file event, so it might be created or modified, and just send that to the person who cares, that needs to know this, and then they can go and run those Python scripts. So they're not needing to constantly sort of log into their server and monitor it. They'll just get an email whenever that process has been done. And then also, while I'm still on here, I'll just refresh this to prove that the data did get written on that schedule earlier. So I can view the first 100. Tested this on my laptop and it was giving me the correct time as 8 something. So, yep, so you can see that that's now on that schedule and that's running and being updated now. So that one did work. Yeah, so this was the automation that I just showed. So you've got the two sort of streams in this automation. One is doing all the processing at the beginning, and then once those geodatabases are being written out in that last workspace, the directory watch is picking those up and then sending an email to someone so that they can start to work through their product finalization process. So yeah, I think Holly was looking at some more chaining workspace.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up from Jen's last demonstration because at the moment on FME Server, we do have a couple of different ways to chain workspaces together. So you can use a scheduler, and if there's worries about time, then you can assign that to job queues. We also had the notification service previously, and then we also have the transformer, the FME Server job submitter. But all of these options came with sort of limitations. So perhaps with the scheduler, if there were time dependencies and you weren't sure how long your workspace would run, it might be hard to set up an accurate schedule. Again, the notification service interface is not that user friendly, and if you have quite a few inputs going in, then it might be hard to understand how you're chaining your workspaces together and if you have actually done that correctly. And with the FME Server job submitter, you can't make alterations within the FME Server web UI. So all of the previous options kind of had limitations. So we're hoping, again, that with automations, this will make the job chaining side of things a lot easier as well, as hopefully Jen has kind of demonstrated to you previously. So we are running out of time, so completely understand if anybody needs to leave the webinar, but we do have one more example that I would like to run through with you. So if you have time, stick around, and if not, this webinar has been recorded and you'll be emailed the recording after the webinar has finished. So if you would like to catch up on that later, you can as well. So this final request submission came in, and this user uses CityWorks to record change requests to sewer, drainage and water systems, but they also use Jira as a task management application to log and track all of their GIS tasks. So what they were interested in is integrating these two different systems together. Obviously, it can be quite a pain to have two separate task management systems and make sure that they're both equally up to date and have to go in and open a task in CityWorks and then go into Jira and do exactly the same thing. So hopefully FME Server can provide a solution here. So as Jen mentioned right at the beginning of this webinar, I'm actually going to talk about integrating Salesforce with Jira. This is simply because we did not have access to a CityWorks platform for this demonstration. And hopefully Salesforce, the setup is very similar, so it should give an accurate representation of how you would set up this service. But before I go into that, I just wanted to mention that my colleague Nathan ran a webinar a couple of weeks ago called Application Integration for Smart Cities. And in there, he did include a practical example of integrating FME Server with CityWorks. And in there, he showed how you can create something called an action, where you can set up an event, which for this user would be a work order created. And you can set the action to a webhook. And this would be a link to an FME Server topic, so a post URL endpoint. And then from that topic message being received, you could then set something up in FME Server. This is exactly what I'm going to be doing in Salesforce. But if you're interested in looking at this with CityWorks, then it's definitely worth going back and having a look at that webinar as well. So this demonstration I broke down into two parts. Oh, sorry. So for anyone that doesn't know, Salesforce is a customer relations management software. So it's a way where you can integrate sales and marketing and customer service all into a single location. And then Jira is where you can upload tasks, and it's a tool that's designed for agile project management. So for this example, I'm going to create a task in Salesforce and have that automatically create an issue in Jira. And that's going to be the first part of this demonstration. And then the second part will be if I close the issue in Jira, I want to see the reverse process and I want to see it closed in Salesforce. So some of this I have preset up, but I will just go into the demonstration now and I'll show you part one and then we'll move over to the second part. So, sorry, hopefully you can see from this screenshot, I already created in Salesforce what they refer to as an outbound message. And this is where I set up the endpoint URL. So I'll just move over to FME Server now and show you where I found that endpoint. So what we can do is we created a topic. So I just called this Holly something. Search would have been better here, Holly. And then under the advanced section, there's this two different URLs, post URL options. And this is whether you want the topic to be the input or the, so we want to use the messages subscriber content URL. And as you can see here, we've got this FME token at the end. And I think Laura mentioned this earlier. But the other new thing that's coming to FME Server is token management. Did you go into that page at all?
I didn't get into it too much.
Okay, so I'm not sure which page it's in.
It's in your user settings.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Manage tokens. So what I've created is you can create different tokens for different things here. So I've created a token specifically for this Salesforce outbound message, and I've set an expiration date as for later this week. But obviously that's something that you can now set yourself. So if you have, as Laura showed, a web app that's using a token, you can set that expiration date way later on and keep that token managed just for that application. So that's another great thing that's coming in 2019. So after I set the topic, that's going to pass through a message that has said a task has been created in Salesforce. And then I want a job to be triggered based on that. So I'll just move over to the first workspace that I've got set that's going to write that issue out in Jira. And so I'll just try and work through this with you. So the first thing we're going to do is just have a creator to get that workspace going. And then we're going to use a JSON flattener because FME Server stores their topic messages as a JSON string. However, what's a bit confusing is that the message passed by Salesforce is XML. So once we've got flattened our JSON to find the subscriber content, which is the message from Salesforce, we're then going to use an XML flattener to get the information out of Salesforce. So what I'm interested in is the task ID and the description and the summary of that task, and that's going to be used as the subject line and the description in Jira. And so the second thing I have here is not error handling, but Salesforce, there isn't a limit on the number of messages it tries, and it will just keep retrying if it doesn't think the message has come through. So what I've got at the end here is I'm recording a database with the task ID along with the newly created Jira ID, so I can keep a track of the pairs of the tasks and the issues. And I've also got the status being recorded there. So what I'm doing in here is I'm just bringing through that database in the database joiner. And if the message has, if it's joined up, then that means it's already been written out into the database and I can end the translation here. There's no need to write it out again. And if it's unjoined, then we can pass it through and create a new issue in Jira. So the way that we're going to be creating a new issue is using that REST API call in the HTTP caller. So there's a couple of different elements of information required to compose the upload body that goes in Jira. So along with the description and summary, we also need the project ID. So this first box is just HTTP caller is just acquiring that project ID. And then once we've got all that information, we've got an attribute manager here. And if I just open this up, hopefully you can see that these are the names coming through from Salesforce. And I'm just renaming them into the format that Jira requires in its REST API call. And I'm also adding in a couple more parts of information that are required to make up that template information. And so lastly, I'm going to put that in a JSON templater, and then I'm going to create a new issue. So I'm using a post request, and I'm specifying the upload body as this creation from the Jira template. And then I'm using some basic authentication in order to create this call. And so we're using the Jira username, which is just your username and Jira. And then I also had to acquire an API key from Jira in order to make this translation. And since I know we're running out of time, I do already have this automation set up. So I think I'll just go into part 2 now. And then once I've explained that as well, we can just see the demonstration working. So for part 2, we could have done it in exactly the same way and set up a webhook in Jira as well that notifies a topic when the issue is closed and then triggers the second workspace. However, just to try and show you something different that we haven't used yet in this presentation, I instead am going to use the email SMTP protocol and have Jira email FME Server when an issue is closed instead. So I will just jump back into FME Server now and go into that automation. So I have that workflow here. So hopefully you can see in this email that I've got email SMTP, and then their username is Jira, and I'm not interested in any attachments, so I've just left this field as blank. And so then to compose this email address, it will just be Jira @ and then we've got Blue Sky because we're using an FME Cloud instance here. If you're on a Windows instance, then this will probably be either the IP address or the FME server name followed by the domain name of your machine. So that's the email setup. And then the second workspace that I have got that will close the issue is slightly simpler. So what we're going to do is when the Jira email is sent, the Jira key is shown in the email subject. So again, we've got a creator just to get the workspace going. And then we've got a string searcher, which uses some regex, which just looks for anything contained within the brackets. This is just simply because this is the format that the Jira email passes that information through as. And then we've got a database joiner. So that information, that Jira key, we recorded in the database. So we can then look for the associated Salesforce task ID in there, which we'll use in the HTTP caller to close that task. So let's move on to the HTTP caller. And this is a patch request using the Salesforce REST API. So as you can see, I'm using that @value ID in the URL request to say that I want to close that task. And this upload body is slightly simpler. The only two requirements are the status and the priority. So I'm just changing the status to completed there. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to update that database to say that this issue has now been closed. So let's jump into the automation now. So as you can see here, I've got two separate workflows going. I've got the topic into the workspace to create a Jira issue, and then I've got an email into the workspace to close the issue. So now I'm just going to enable this workspace, jump into Salesforce and create a task, hopefully see that issue created in Jira, and then do the reverse process. So this is the Salesforce homepage for anybody that is not familiar with this application. So we're just going to jump into tasks, create a new task. We'll call it demo. So again, the things that I pulled through to write into the issue was just this subject, and then also this commentation here, description and comments here. So now that I've saved that, this should trigger the first workspace to run. So hopefully if we jump into the automation, I had this going yesterday. So yes, 9/11. So hopefully now if we go into the Jira dashboard and we'll just refresh that. And here you can see demo 4 was created. It's got the subject as demo and the description as text here. And so the second part of that workspace was to close this and see it closed in Salesforce. So at the moment, what we're looking for is this status here. So you can see it's not been started. And when we close this issue in Jira, we expect to see this status marked as closed in Salesforce. So I'll just do that now, transition to closed. And hopefully, if we refresh the page once or twice, depending on how long this takes to hit it, we should see the status as closed. Okay, so that task has run. It says it's run successfully. So let's just refresh that again. And it's not picking it up. This was working yesterday. So I'm not sure why that is, but hopefully you get the idea. It should work. But anyway, that is the final demonstration. I know we're over time, so I don't want to sit around trying to figure out why that's not working. I can do that in my own time later. But hopefully you saw that it worked going from Salesforce to Jira, and the process should be the same. So I can go and have a look at that later. But yeah, so let's move back into the webinar. And that's it. So thank you very much for listening to us today. I really appreciate the people that stuck around as well. I hope that was interesting and informative and worth the extra 10 minutes of your time. If you do have any questions, then please feel free to send them in for us. Is there anything else that needs to be said?
I think just stay tuned for the blog tomorrow, because I think Mark Ireland's going to be putting his blog out probably tomorrow morning, which will cover more around what automations can do. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time this morning and happy Wednesday.